My name's Harriet. I hack your AI, so the bad guys can't.
Hello, welcome back. I always get asked questions about my PhD, so I thought I'd finally do a bit of a PhD Q&A. For this episode, I thought it'd be good to go to a university. So I'm actually at the University of Sydney in Sydney, Australia, obviously. Now, this is not where I do my PhD, but it's a lot more aesthetic than the University of New South Wales, where I do my PhD. So, sorry, UNSW, but you know what's up. It's lovely there, but it's just very modern, which is great. But the University of Sydney is known for having really old Hogwarts-style buildings, and I happen to be in the area, so I thought I would record this little Q&A here. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of questions that I tend to get asked, but I'm going to start with my story and my PhD journey. So I've seen the PhD, sorry, I keep looking at people around me, but no one knows me here, so I shouldn't worry. I don't go here, Mean Girl style. So I've seen the PhD journey from a lot of different sides. I started in 2021, I was part-time, I was doing it alongside a full-time job that was, very supportive and helped me a lot with choosing a topic and finding experts to talk to. But then along that journey, I obviously left that job, started my own company, continued doing the PhD, but it's really morphed, and that journey has taken me somewhere I didn't really expect it to go. In particular, the topic of my PhD, which was adversarial machine learning, is something that I genuinely discovered to be, a true passion of mine and something that I wanted my career, the rest of my career to be about, which is why I started the company. But I obviously didn't start with that particular topic. I started looking at, it was more like communicating technical related advice and insight to military customers, because I was working with the government and defence, and that's sort of what I thought would be really interesting. And then during my literature review, I came across adversarial machine learning, and I was like, this is it. But I finished my bachelor degree in 2015, and then I started the PhD in 2021. So I also have a particular point of view as someone who worked in the field or an adjacent field for a period of time before then deciding to do a PhD. My journey is also somewhat unique in that typically you would do an honours year after your bachelor, and then that would help you, sort of lead you into the PhD, whether that's immediately after or, sometime later. However, I never did an honours year because I did my bachelor in physics and bioanthropology, and I just kind of wanted to get out and start working and doing stuff, and an honours year didn't really inspire me. I didn't realise that would make it really hard to get into a PhD later. It was always something where, at school, I always felt like I was the kind of person who might want to do a PhD because I genuinely loved school and I loved learning and I loved the academic environment. But yeah, when I finished my degree, I just wanted to go and start living. Not that university isn't living, you know what I mean. But then when I was in my first roles, in my consulting job, I was really missing study, I guess. I really missed learning new things, and so I picked up a master's, and I spent a long time doing that master's. I went through 3 different subject areas. I started in economics, and it wasn't quite mathy enough for me, so I changed to software engineering, which was just a bit too mathy, and then eventually I landed on cybersecurity. And so finishing that master's ultimately helped me get into the PhD process, but it's a very unique experience. I have about 1 year or so left in my PhD. I technically haven't finished it because I started it part-time, which I sometimes feel a bit weird about. I often feel like when I tell people that I'm doing a PhD, they look at me and they're like, oh, okay, so you're 22 and you've just finished your bachelor's and you're doing a PhD. I'm like, well, no, I'm almost 30 and I worked for a long time before doing it, and now I'm almost finished, but I did it a long time part-time, so it's sort of tricky, and I often avoid talking about it a bit, but I probably shouldn't. I should be proud that I'm doing a PhD and that I'm still doing it and that I'm almost. So my PhD journey is obviously pretty unique. The thing that's really important to note about PhDs is that depending on the university, the institution, your particular, your country, your region of the world, it can be really different. So I'll try and keep it as generic as possible, but it's important to do your own research, obviously, when you're thinking about doing a PhD. So I'm going to go through a few questions here. So the first question is, what is a PhD? What is it? That's a really good question. So a PhD stands for a Doctor of Philosophy. That's just what it's called across the board, and it's typically a 3 to 4 year program that's focused on research. So depending on the university you might go to, sometimes they do have coursework components as well, so different courses that you have to finish in order to finish the PhD too, and they tend to be things like research skills, or maybe if you're in a discipline that requires a lot of subject matter expertise, things like biology, chemistry. I know a lot of the sciences tend to have coursework that delve into particular topics like that. I was fortunate that my degree does not. Fortunate, I guess. I mean, maybe a course on research skills would have been useful, but personally I really like just having total control over what I do and how I spend my time, but it really depends. But typically it is very research focused, and to finish a PhD you either submit a dissertation, which is a 100,000 or so page book called the dissertation, which is all of the research that you've done over that 3 to 4 years. And a good rule of thumb that my university at least goes by is that the dissertation should be equal to 3 to 4 peer-reviewed journal papers. So the amount of effort that it would take, or the amount of novelty and work that it would take to publish 3 to 4 peer-reviewed journal articles should be the equivalent of a dissertation. But then the dissertation takes that research, and you have to make sure there's also a literature review and different chapters that correspond to each part of the research, and a conclusion. And there are other ways to graduate with a PhD where it's just by publication, which means that you literally just staple those pages together. And depending on the discipline you're in, or the school you're in, the country you're in, there's different preferences. But the preference at my university, at least, is that it's through dissertation, so I have to write that 100-word dissertation at the end. People often hear the term thesis. The thesis is sort of like the research question, and then the dissertation is actually that volume of material that you're producing to answer that research question, or at least further knowledge. So how do you choose the right PhD program for you? Well, it depends on a lot of different things. The things that were really important for me when I started my PhD were things like flexibility of location. You know, the great thing about computer science PhD is that most of the time you can work entirely remotely, unless you're with a research group that requires you to be present for some reason. Typically you can just do it, entirely virtually, which means that because I travel a lot for my job, I can do it anywhere. I could go work from Bali for a month or a week, as you saw, if I wanted to, and just work on it there. So that really works for me, but then it means that I have a lot of independence, and I'm not necessarily with like a research group who can help me or collaborate with me. And even though my supervisor has other PhD students, we're all working on different topics, so even if we do meet, it's not like in a lab environment. For example, in the sciences, if you're working on a PhD, you're probably doing experiments in a lab, which means that you have to work with part of a team, and it means that you don't have as much control over what your PhD topic is. Like, I had total control to choose what I wanted to do my PhD on, and that's not necessarily the case if you're working in a lab environment. But I suspect that most of my viewers are people who are in data science, AI, cybersecurity. So there's quite a lot of independence and autonomy around being able to design your PhD the way it suits you. Okay, what are the prerequisites for a PhD program is the next question. And yes, like I said, an honours year is generally a prerequisite. That's like an extra research year on top of your bachelor degree. I didn't do that, but I was able to do a coursework master's with a research capstone, and that research capstone was equivalent to an honours year, which meant that because I got really good marks in that, and I was able to publish that paper in a peer-reviewed journal, I was able to use that to get into the PhD program, which I'm very grateful for. Okay, how long does it take to complete a PhD? It usually takes 3 or so years. That's a very hand-wavy number. It can take, I think 3 to 4 years full-time equivalent is the expected length of time. And things like stipends or scholarships are usually set for a certain period of time that you would want to submit within by. But then if you take a little bit longer, that's usually okay, but it depends on the school. Like, you have to get it approved by the school. I believe you can submit it at 2.5 years or maybe 2.75 years if you feel like you've completed everything you need to. But 3 to 4 years sounds like a long time, but it goes by really quickly. Like, I'm not so stressed about submitting the dissertation yet, but everyone tells me I will be, so maybe I need to start hustling. Maybe I need to start worrying about it more. I don't know. Okay, the next question is, can I work while completing my PhD? Yes, I worked full-time when I did my PhD part-time, which was difficult in some ways. I was really lucky that my job was supportive and gave me time off, like paid time off, to be able to work on the PhD. Not all workplaces will be that accommodating, and many workplaces are the kinds where, you work from 8 till 8 every day, and they're like, work on your PhD, and you're like, with what time? So it really depends on your circumstance, but even if you are doing a full-time PhD and you are given a scholarship or a stipend, that's often not quite enough. You would be expected to do some tutoring work or have some other jobs or some consulting work to be able to, live off. A stipend is sort of like enough to pay the bills, but it's not enough to go on private jets, Okay, here's a good question. Is it worth doing a PhD? This is something I get asked a lot, actually, especially because I started mine later, and I don't intend to be a researcher later. I already have a company. That's all I want to do for the rest of my life. But for me, I think starting the PhD was about finding, I don't know, it sounds silly, finding my passion. When I first started it, I was really interested in a lot of areas at the intersection of AI and security. And I really just wanted the mental and time-based space to be able to work on something. And the PhD structure was really well suited to that, because the whole point of it is that you're going through a journey of finding a thing that you want to work on and produce some area of novelty or expertise to contribute to that field. And so it really worked for me. But if you want to become a researcher afterwards, a PhD is considered necessary for most jobs. You'll often reach a sort of a ceiling of research jobs unless you have a PhD. I've noticed a lot of my friends are struggling with that. And then depending on what area or what field you're going into, a PhD is quite respected. It's nice to be able to call yourself a doctor. It means that you're well researched in something. So it really depends on what works for you. And I think a lot of people who ask me this are also people who've been working for a while and they're looking to make a career pivot. And so a PhD is a really good way of doing that, but it's certainly not the only way. 3 to 4 years full-time is quite a long time to step out of your career to do something different. And unless you either genuinely enjoy the process or you really care about the outcome that it's going to get you afterwards, really think about what it is that you're looking for by doing the PhD. And I would offer that advice to people leaving university as well. A lot of people who start a PhD do it just because they don't know what to do, what else to do after leaving university, and that's fine. I mean, we've all taken jobs for that reason. That was certainly what my first job was. But it's a long commitment for something that you might not be all that interested in and you don't really want to finish. So think about that. But if it's the right program for you, if you find the right supervisor, if it aligns with your future goals and aspirations, then I absolutely highly recommend it. How do I find a supervisor? That is a really important question. A lot of people will say that your PhD supervisor is the most important person in your life for that few years, and it's really true. When I was applying for mine, I reached out to lots of different potential supervisors and met with them for, coffee. It's like dating, it's more about finding the right fit and the right connection. someone who's working on research that you're interested in, but also someone who's going to reply to your emails, someone who's actually going to make time for you to help you with your research, with technical things, someone who's going to advocate for you, because that is their job too. They have to advocate for your place to stay at the university, especially when it comes to scholarships and awards and things like that. And so in the end, there were two people I was choosing between, and one of them just took weeks to reply to all of my emails, and the other guy would reply the same day. And so I went with the person who replied the same day. And I'm honestly really happy with my choice. Part of it was also luck. He's just really dedicated, on the ball, the kind of person who takes an active interest and is working on things that I also think is really cool. So it's important to find someone who's reputable, but it's also really important to make sure that you're going to have a good working relationship, because it's basically like being married for 3 to 4 years to someone. It's that level of commitment. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question because I'm probably going to start getting burnt soon, honestly. How can I make the most out of my PhD experience? Apart from getting student discounts, which is obviously great and I'm a big fan of, the great thing about doing a PhD is that whenever you want to talk to someone, you can just message them and be like, hi, I'm a PhD student researching this. Would you be willing to have a chat with me? And most of the time, people have a lot of time for PhD students, and most people I've reached out to like that have been really generous with their time and their expertise. And it's a great way to build a community around the world. I've met with other PhD students in research labs in other countries by just reaching out in that way, because the research and the academic community, they prioritize ideas and having interesting conversations and making cool connections with people. And it's a really great way to be able to learn not just about your own topic, but about lots of things. And so, I would really encourage you to make the most out of being a PhD student. Talk to people that you think you wouldn't necessarily talk with. Reach out to all the people who are doing research that you're interested in. Make the most of being part of a university, all of the other things that universities offer, like groups, hobbies, communities, activities, trips. Make the most of that. It's really fantastic. But then keep in mind that university isn't everything in life, it's one little part of the world, and at the end of the day we want to think about the kind of impact our research is going to have more broadly outside of, just publishing a paper or just becoming a doctor. But what kind of tangible real world impact could it have? Anyway, I hope that was interesting for you. I've certainly really enjoyed my PhD journey. Would recommend it to people if you think it's the right fit for you. And comment down below if you have any other questions. I'm going to do a part 2 to this, definitely. And in the meantime, please like this video, subscribe to my channel. It makes a massive difference. It helps me feel far less weird about sitting in the middle of an oval of a school I don't even go to, talking into my camera. So thank you again. I'll see you next time.